We are back on the chosen journey, magical chapter with the man with the big money grip. He's Steve Karsay. I'm Jonathan Aha Cohen. And we are here back talking about the hot stove season. It is the off season in baseball. Steve, I got to ask you for today's topic. Now, if I was the owner of a team, let's say $100 billion fell into my lap and I went and bought a baseball team, I would function my team very simply. When free agency would come, I would come to the players and say, listen, we don't dish out here 5 years, 10 years, none of this kind of stuff. You want a 5 year contract? No problem. Team opt outs, I get to opt out every year. If I'm not happy with your performance, you are gone and you're not getting one red penny from me. And you can go and try your luck elsewhere. How successful would my team be at building a team in that case in free agency?
Not very good.
No.
Not very good. No. I mean, obviously, if you could do that, I think the teams these days would be doing that. But with agents and whatnot, you can't have any collusion between the owners. So, a free agent is a free agent, and every team values free agents differently, and it's a good system.
This is where I don't understand because aside from the key quarterbacks, what I just described really is the NFL. If you think about it, where guys can get cut at any point, it feels like, and not, very little of the contracts are guaranteed. How did baseball come to the point of these monster 10-year, 200, 300, $400 million contracts? You can opt out at any point or at certain intervals. And teams, they rarely have their options. How did this all come to be? How did it because it feels like it is a player driven league at the end of the day, but who's the one putting the butts in the seats? Who's putting the performance? And who's generating the owner's money? It's the players, right? So it's an interesting system in baseball.
The players' union. That's who did it. When you have to renegotiate deals, and the obviously owners want to take advantage of what they can get, and the players' union negotiates for the players on their behalf, and they always have to come to some type of an agreement. And it hurts everybody when you have a strike, right? So that's the difference. Is the players' union in baseball has never bent has never broken, I should say. They've always bent a little bit, but they've never broken on that aspect of guaranteed contracts. Where I believe it was 1987 that the NFL had a strike, and that's where that transpired, where people crossed the line who were players already and started taking contracts, and then it became a real big mess that we don't have enough time to talk about. But it is what it is, and that's how the NFL started after 1987 of doing guaranteed money and contracts, and then the rest of the contract isn't guaranteed. Where baseball continued on with the escalation of salaries as inflation has come about, and where we're at today, and it's all about production, right?
I'm not a union guy, I'll tell you that, but it's funny because I often play the devil's advocate in this, and I tell fans, and they tell me these greedy players and they're making 30 million. It's so not fair. And I tell them, think about this: when we go to games, how much are our ticket prices for 81 home games? Think about the media now, multimedia, as far as all the games being sold on MLB.com and people streaming and all that, merchandise sales. Go and take a family of four to a baseball game with the concessions, programs, whatever you're going to spend, and you're walking another $400, $500 easily. If the players all made minimal money, guess what? Then the owners are making billions and billions and billions, because this is no longer millions. We are in the billions when it comes to professional sports. Is it really fair that these guys are sacrificing their lives, their bodies, they're away from their families, they've trained their whole lives to become experts at their craft, and they're going to make somebody else billions? If they're going to generate billions, shouldn't they share in it? So I could see definitely that aspect. And what really opened my eyes, Steve, is the value of these franchises. Like, you remember in the days when it was at $10 million, $50 million, $100 million. Now, any league, it seems we're in the billions, billions. So even if you're not making billions that year, you own an entity worth billions. The economics of the game are such that, for a player, as far as their salary goes, when now that franchises are worth billions, there's no way that any player can retire unless you're LeBron James and go buy, and even he can't go and buy a franchise on his own. This shows the dollar value of these franchises, and I think that's forgotten a lot by the fans.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just grown, right? I mean, it slowly grows over time with the amount of TV deals and parking and, like you said, merchandise and things like that. So, uh, you know, that's why they negotiate contracts between the owners and the players union, and they come up with what they feel is the best deal that they share some of the proceeds. Listen, the owners still get more of the proceeds than the players do. That's just, they own the team. I mean, and obviously, you're not going to be able to play if you don't have an owner. But they go through these tough and hard negotiations every 7 years to try to come to some conclusion of what's fair for both sides, and they usually do that. Sometimes there's a couple bumps in the road, but at the end of the day, as they say, it's business.
Where I get stuck, Steve, and as a fan and analyst of the game, this year especially, the offseason began, it was all about options. We had player options, team options, mutual options. I get so lost in this, and I start to take a look at it. I'm thinking, why would you decline an option? You have this option to come back at this amount of dollars. Are you taking this risk? Like, you walk us through a little bit from a player's standpoint when you're sitting on a contract and you have the ability to stay in a contract, let's say for 3-4 years, or you have one more year and it's a good dollar value. Why not just take the guaranteed money? Why were there so many declining options? And why is this game become so much about options?
Okay, so obviously the agents are the ones, who've gone to school and who negotiate the contracts and feel what's fair. They do the analytical numbers, and obviously each free agent has a comp, that their agent goes by, and that comp is this player has the same stats as this player. This player's making X, my guy's not making that much. He should make X or maybe a little bit more, depending on his age, depending on what numbers, depending on how long he's done it, and things like that. So when they negotiate these deals, they try to get the best deal for their client, because that's what they do, right? As a lawyer, you try to get the best deal for your client when you're representing somebody and you're doing that. So you're negotiating a deal. Now, how the teams look at it is like, okay, we might give this player X amount of years at X dollars, but we want to tack options on to that contract, whether it be a team option or a player option. Team option, the team controls the option of whether they want to pay that player or not, if they have a good year prior to or not, or the agent negotiates a player option where the player gets to make that choice. And sometimes there's a mutual option that they negotiate as well. And a mutual option is both the player and the team need to agree on that and both say yes at a certain point. If one declines and one accepts, then it's null and void of the contract. So you asked me a little bit of how to explain why, if you have an option year left, that why don't you just take that option year? Here's just a small example of that. Say I'll just pull out whoever it might be. I'll say Aaron Nola. Okay, Aaron Nola, 4-year, $44 million deal. Okay, now that's $11 million a year. Okay, say he had an option for another $11 million as a player option, right? Over those last 4 years, as Aaron Nola outperformed $11 million a year when other guys are getting 20 to 22 or $24 million a year. So if you're that player and you've fulfilled your contract for 4 years and you have $11 million left on that contract, if you pick that up, or you get to go to free agency by declining that option and make 7 years and 140 million. Do you want to play that extra year at 11 million for the team and maybe hurt yourself and not be able to make that 7-year $140 million? Probably not. So that's where the decline of that option comes in. If a player has a terrible year, the prior to that team option, we'll pull out another name, Javi Baez, right? He signed a 7-year deal. First 3 years are guaranteed. He has been not the greatest player offensively for those years. He has 4 years and $98 million left on that. The production he had done in the first 3 years would not, on an open market, would not receive anything close to 4 years and 98 million. So now he decides to take that because he knows, and his agent knows, they're not going to come close to anywhere getting that money. Why would you decline that money, go on a free agent, and make 3 years for 30 million instead of getting 4 for 98? So there's a lot of things that go into it. I mean, sometimes the player option sweetens the pot for a player to go to a certain team where another team will not do that. Um, you know, I think the more aggressive teams are the ones who give the player options because they know that there's always a chance that that player has a terrible year or terrible 2 years in a row, and it lies in his hands. I think Rush Stripling might have had a player option with the Giants, and he just didn't perform really well. And he's making 8.5 million on a player option. If he goes on the open market, he ain't getting $8.5 million. So it's just wise of him to say, "Hey, I'm going to take the $8.5 million."
Great example because he was 1A, 1B with another player, right? Sean Manaea. Manaea opted out. I was in shock, but he's a lefty. He's still young. He'll still get a 2-3 year contract, at least 10 mil. That's what they're calling for. I was blown away with that.
Let's just not forget these agents know prior to declining this player option what their client is worth on the open market. Like sometimes there's that fine line if they know that maybe it is, maybe it's not, and then the player is like, I think I might want to take this instead of hitting the open market and guarantee myself this. And then the other player's like, no, you know what? I know I'm worth more than this. And if you're telling me that there's 2 or 3 teams already that are asking you for my services and they're willing to exceed this amount for multi years, again, what's better, 1 year and 8.5 million, or would you rather have 2 years at 18 million?
True. And then I also think about teams like the Brave, for example, that lock in their core really early and paying them a lot more than they need to at that stretch, but they're trying to lock down a few arbitration years, hopefully free agency years, right? I remember when the Astros signed John Singleton, and I thought that was a genius move by them. Baseball was hailing them. People said Singleton was so silly to take that deal. And what ended up happening? He didn't pan out. But then you see the Braves when they extend their players at a young age, and the players are saying, wow, I locked myself too early, and that's not fair. But it's funny, if they didn't end up producing, they would happily take that money. The only guy I recall in the last 20, 30 years was Kenji Jojima back on the Mariners, where he walked away from the last 1, 2, or 3 years. I don't remember his contract. He said, I'm not playing up to my performance, and I don't want that money. I think that's the one guy that would ever do that. Anybody else, if they can't hit a lick, they're going to take their contracts. They're going to still cash in their paychecks.
Well, they're guaranteed, right? Like it is what it is. It's a chance on both sides. There's a chance of injury, the chance of poor production. There's a chance of surplus value or overproduction, like a Ronald Acuna, right? But in that spot, and a perfect example is right now is Corbin Carroll, right? Mm-hmm. I think he signed a 7-year, $106 million deal, or 8-year, 100 with a couple of options tacked on. So you're looking at like $12 million a year for him. In 3 years, he might exceed all of those expectations and still be locked in. And the Diamondbacks took a chance on him when he was a rookie to give him that, or before his rookie year. Another one was Evan Longoria, right? I think he signed a $44 million deal for a lengthy period of time when he was with the Rays, and they took a chance on him. So, it works both ways. I mean, you get guys who will turn that down and something happens. Juan Gonzalez, I remember, turned down a
with
huge
the Tigers
deal.
Yes.
Yes.
He was on the tip of my tongue.
and then his back got hurt, and then they took it off the table, and he never got that. So it comes down to the player. It comes down to what he thinks he's worth, what he wants to lock himself up as. I think it's a little bit easier as a position player to turn down some of these contracts as it is a pitcher, because as a pitcher you just never know health wise with what you're doing, because it's so unnatural, and the velocity and the stress that you're putting on your arm is so heavy that it could happen at any time.
If you and I looked at the list of the big contracts, the 5 year plus big dollar contracts from last year's free agency, I don't know how many of them panned out. And you know what? They're going to go right back to doing it again. And I'm going to sum up today's episode. It just hit me when this all comes down to it. Scott Boras, is he good for baseball? Because if I'm a player, I see him, I'm shaking his hand, because if there's no Scott Boras in baseball, I don't know if the contracts are where they are today.
No, he's not good for baseball. He's great for baseball. Like that's the end of the deal. Is like, why do you think guys leave their agents and go to him? Because he's one of the best or the best in the business of maximizing a guy's talent for a short period of time. As we talked about, in baseball, you have a small window to make your living, because at some point you're going to get too old in your 30s, and that's crazy to say, but your production is going to start to decline at some point. It's just not feasible as your body gets older and you put yourself through this, that you're able to keep the same production year after year after year. Like, it's just one of those things. And I will say, with some of these big contracts, you have to give the player a little bit of leeway going from one team to a new team in the first year of his deal, because there is a comfort level, there's an expectation level, and and I'll use a Trey Turner. It's really hard to go from one place like the Dodgers and put the same production up with the Phillies. It takes time to get comfortable. It really does. I mean, I know I may catch some flack for saying that, and backing these guys for that, but going to a new place, settling in, and then getting comfortable in what you're going to produce, it takes time. So I always give the guys a little leeway in their first year of the deal. I expect Trey Turner to come out next year and just be an absolute monster, now that he's kind of turned that corner on that aspect in the first year.
We got you on record for that. And when it comes to Scott Boras, I always say he didn't put a gun to the GM's head. At the end of the day, he has a very smart team. He's smart enough to surround himself with the best of the best of the best, as far as his training facilities, as far as his analytics go. I've seen a couple of his free agency portfolios that he's put together. He knows his stats in and out, and he's the greatest salesman. There's only one reason, in my estimation, why he's not going to be president of the United States one day. He can't afford the pay cut.
Very true.
Like, you think about Boras, he is a brand. He is an institution, and his GDP is worth more than a lot of countries. And the players are very good for it. And imagine he went into other sports. He would be, imagine the NBA, he got his fingers into it. Or, we want to get into the NHL because, if you saw the NHL where their salaries are at, they are so below every other sport. It's the top NHL player, I think, is equal to the bottom MLB player, and that says a lot. But Steve, it comes down to economics. You put
half the size of the stadiums,
half the size, and how much
half
are they
the
getting?
games.
And how much are you getting for TV rights, media rights? How much merchandise are you pushing? Concessions, folks. It's all dinero at the end of the day. Baseball, like any other sport, like everything else in life, there's a balance sheet, there's an income statement, and what is your income? What are your expenses? And they sign these contracts because they're still making money out of it. If they weren't, if every team was signing these contracts and every single team lost 50 million a year, they ain't going to do it. The economics wouldn't work.
Very true.
We're keeping an eye on Shohei Ohtani as we're heading into the off season, and we are in the hot stove season. And last thought, signing before or after Christmas in your estimation?
Ohtani?
Yeah.
After.
He's not in the rush. The 500, 600 million will be there when he's ready for it.
I don't think he's going to get it.
He's going to be below 500.
I believe he will be below 500. He will be in the range of the Aaron Judge contract that he got, and then you can bank on a boatload of incentives on the pitching side to bump that salary up to what they think he's worth starting in 2025.
And I say there's no chance he's doing a Harper type contract. He's going to have opt outs up the wazoo.
It's very true. He might. He's turning what, 29? I mean, if he goes 10 years, if he goes 9 years, you're already at 38. Like this is his one dip in the free agent pool if it's a long-term deal without any opt-outs.
Stay tuned, folks. It's going to be an interesting offseason. Steve Karsay, Jonathan Cohen. This is the Chosen Journey podcast. We'll see y'all real soon.